to the pursuit of truth. So from one of my videos, I think 798, I got a comment, and I asked for some examples. I think it was to do with the lineage of, it was to do with the Promised Land and why the firstborn wasn't counted. And I've got this beautiful email. So I wanted to read it out and make it part of the pursuit of truth because it opened my eyes to some other things. So let me read it out to you. Let me try and make it bigger so I can actually just read it. When I stumbled upon your video the other day, I was genuinely interested in what you have to say. But as it is the 798th episode of your podcast, please forgive me if I don't have the chance to listen to them all. I will try to listen to the 4 or 5 episodes relevant to the topic of the Promised Land, and I will concentrate on this one. And if you want to be in touch, we can continue our conversation. Also, I really wanted to tell you that I am on the journey myself and in no way better or wiser man than you are. Please do not read these lines and think that I am bashing you up with Bible verses. I am a Christian myself, but I have taken the time to study extensively what I'm about to share below, and I have an MA in classics from La Sorbonne University in Paris, where I studied Bible translations and classic literature. What a beautiful opening, and sort of like setting the way so that no one can get angry. I love that. The very first premise we must agree is that we assume the reliability of the text of the scriptures, i.e. we read what it says and we start from there. Otherwise, this conversation doesn't make any sense. I'm questioning the Bible just as you do, but I also give it the benefit of doubt, and I do not make what I know or believe the rule of interpretation. These texts were written down long before us in a place and time foreign to our understanding of the universe, hygiene, geography, and so much more. We cannot ask of it that it agrees with us 100%. We have to approach it with respect and ears to hear. This made me think of like this idea of ground rules, and it made me think about the ground rules for this argument, in the sense that a lot of it, when I was researching on Google and when I was looking through Bible verses and what other scholars had said, which I did the screen share I'm doing now, the thing we have to acknowledge is that the basis of our minds, the basis of the interpretations and everything, is based on other men hundreds or thousands of years ago who wrote things. And the truth is, we don't know their intention or their reliability. And also us looking back thousands of years over a time is also problematic, in the sense that we look at it in our eyes, like he's sort of saying there, and look back then, and how do we know things back then? We're relying on a lot of things based on pieces of parchment or paper that have managed to survive time, and whether what that people wrote down was factually accurate or wasn't biased. Nothing's changed within humanity, in the sense that of power and greed and trying to get your view across and all that kind of stuff. And so therefore, that is problematic in that sense. But anyway, the very first, so I've done that. The second point is that I would be very cautious about using AI to find answers to the very pressing questions, because when we look things up in publication and other trustworthy literature, they tend to be more complex and also a lot deeper and richer than a few lines from Google. But I do myself check online for information, so I do understand when you do it. Yeah, I get it. The only thing is, I do find that a little bit sort of snobbery, in the sense that, just because it's AI or just because it's Google, it's not going to give you, the crux of the matter. But yeah, I get it. You may get a dusty old book that postulates over the same question over chapters rather than a few lines. And I get there may be missing nuances and depth there. I guess I wasn't in a library, so I was just basing on this. But yeah, I get what you're saying. That is true. And I've found a lot of, I think even when I was going through it, there were bits that were, sometimes it gives you the answer you want and sort of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree with it. It's a new technology. It's not in the same, scholarly sense, but I guess I wasn't doing it in a scholarly way. But yeah, I get what you're saying. These two things out of the way, I want to address the question you asked in the video. Yeah. So, question: why is Ishmael not included in the original promise given to Abraham? And I went, if you've seen all these promised land ones, I went back and forward over this question. 1 minute I was leading, okay, I see that, and then I'd find a bit more, and then I'd make another one and see, and it went up and down. I went so many different ways. So some of this is sort of, I may have gone over. The story does not start with Abraham. To understand, it's necessary to go back all the way to Genesis 3:15, when after the fall of mankind into sin, God promises a solution, a saviour, the seed of the woman. So very naturally, in the next chapter, when Eve gets pregnant, the first time she asks herself, in essence, is he the promised seed? But later in life, Cain, the firstborn of Eve, kills his younger brother Abel because of jealousy. They both wanted to offer sacrifice to God. Cain was a farmer, and he put on the altar the fruit of his labours, his own efforts, his works, where Abel, who was a shepherd, offered a lamb, the life of another, in place of his own. Genesis 4, chapter 4, verses 3-5. Note, there is here no disrespect towards working, and there is no cruelty towards animals, but the point that is being made through Scripture is that sin is grave. It separates us from God and got us barred from the garden in the first place. The wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23, as God told Adam in Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 17. What is the remedy of sin? Not our efforts, our good deeds, our works, but our faith. The trust we place in God's word to do what he says and to say what he will do. And so that's the point. The point is even clearer. The text of Scripture consistently makes it clear that the blood of an innocent victim is shed in place of the guilty sinner who offers it. This is called substitution. This is why God forbids the Jews from eating the blood, Leviticus 17:11, because it is sacred. It makes provision for the forgiveness of sin. Sacrifice is costly. It required the blood, that is the life of the sinner, to be shed, Ezekiel 18:4. But God accepted the sacrifice of an animal in place of man's life. That theme runs through the book of Leviticus, i.e., how does God forgive sin? And if so, how do I comply if I want to be forgiven? The fact that the guilty sinner goes back to God, not on the basis of what he does, works, but on the basis of what God says, faith, revolts Cain, and he kills his brother, demonstrate that he's more in line with the seed of the serpent than with the seed of the woman. At the end of chapter 4, Eve gives birth to Seth and says in the original, God has granted me another seed in the place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth is thus the third son of Adam and Eve. The promised line continues through him. Now, in the New Testament, Paul makes the point in Galatians 3 that faith and works are still polar opposites. The whole chapter is important, but verses 15-22 gives us the main idea. The promise God made to Abraham includes the way more than land on this earth. It is a promise of eternal life in the new earth, completely restored to its original state and forever freed from the effects of sin. The promise was given to God by Abraham through election, i.e., God chose Abraham out of his sovereign right as the creator of the universe, and nobody can challenge this, as it would amount to blasphemy, in effect telling him, what are you doing, God? Are you serious? Why choose Abraham and not William, or whoever else it may be? He is God, and he can do what he pleases, period. Followed by a period. Full stop. And God, who is outside of space and time, he knows the whole film before it even starts, can work through the genealogies towards a goal. He himself set up in Genesis the seed of the woman, that is Jesus Christ. Galatians 3:16 says the promise was spoken to Abraham and to his seed. Scriptures does not say and to his seeds, meaning many people, but and to his seed, meaning one person, who is Christ. The only thing the only thing, which chapter was that? Was that in the Torah, yeah, part of the Bible, the Old Testament? Yeah, I don't know enough of Hebrew to, because as I've seen, like with any translation, whether it's biblical or Quranic, translations, I mean, you can go through how many different versions where different sets of people have taken original text, or what is left of original translations of original text in the New Testament's side, and try to retranslate and find out that, oh, wait a minute, this word, and it seems to be a lot with Hebrew and I mean, maybe it's with English as well and Arabic, that words can have multiple different meanings, and you have to make sure you pick the right definition to make a translation. So I don't know enough to know, like, when that translation of seed, whether that is the relevant or whatever. But yeah, I'm going with you, know that. But that was another thing that was coming across to me, is that this idea of translations. I mean, I don't know, that's why Muslims like the idea of learning Arabic, so that you learn the actual words, and Jews do this as well. But of course, with the New Testament, the Bible, that part of it, only the Greek survives, isn't it? There's no Aramaic, no Hebrew version. That's lost, and all we have is a translation. So it depends how great that translation was done in the first place, which, considering it was done so long ago, I don't know how clear it is. But anyway, that's beside the point. The claim of the Bible is that the story is an integrated continuum. That it is, if you take it as a whole, 66 books written by 40 authors, plus 40 authors, over 1,500 years, you find an unified story, and that all points to Jesus Christ. So then, why not Ishmael? Yes, that's where we started. Again, we have to heed the sovereign choice of God. In the Bible, there is the consistent pattern, but we have to dig up a little bit to find it. Otherwise, it would be too easy. The plain reading of the text shows that the line of succession doesn't always follow the firstborn. Cain is excluded because he killed Abel. Seth is the third son of Adam, and Eve. Out of the three, yeah. The only thing is, I get the idea of moving from, that in UK or historically, it's the firstborn and all that kind of stuff, and that may not be the case with different areas. I get the idea of the first person may not be. My only understanding is when I read that verse, and remember, I'm reading an English translation of that verse, so it depends how well it's been translated. And if you go on Google, you can find that same verse, like you've translated with singular, some translate as plural. I don't know enough to go back to the Hebrew and look at that word and say, can you definitively say it's seed or seeds or whatever? And thus my understanding of that, if I was told that by God, if God came to me and told me, I would see it as, well, I don't need to only pick one. Why am I only picking one? I have many children. In fact, when I went through further on this pursuit, I found out that there was even children, because obviously I know about Ishmael and Isaac, but there's others according to this genealogy of this family tree. So my understanding is, if he said your descendants, why is it only limited to one? Because I wouldn't see it like that. I mean, I've got 3 children, and one's a stepchild and 2 are from me 100%, as it were. I see all 3, and if God said, that your descendants will get this house, then I would, as in a will, I would see it with all 3. I wouldn't be just thinking, wow, because English law has it's the firstborn, or because in the Cain and Abel story, that's why we're going to go with a third one. So I don't necessarily know why. I mean, I know it is in the Bible. He then retells it to, is it Seth? No, who was it? He retells it to, not Seth. Who does he retell it to? Israel. I can't remember what his original name is before he changed his name to Israel. It gets retold again, but my thing on that is that doesn't necessarily mean that it negates the original. If you said it to him as your descendants, I mean, even if he only had one descendant or no descendants at the time when it was told, because God is Alpha and Omega, that would, to me, say everyone. He knows you're going to have 4 children, say, so it's going to count all of them. And if he comes back and tells you and another one the same thing, does that necessarily mean that those other 3 now are not part of the picture? They're no longer descendants. So that's, I guess it's from a sort of, what's the word, linguistic thing I'm seeing it. So, I mean, that's why I was open to the idea of it. And plus also, as I went further on, they intermarried. within the family, within cousins. So therefore, it passes back anyway, because if it's only going through, which one is it? Isaac, Ishmael. If it's only going through Ishmael and not Isaac, and going through his lineage, there's one of his Ishmael's relatives that marries back into through a cousin to the Isaac side of the family, and this therefore brings it back around because their children then are now part of that. So yeah, that was just, I guess that's the problem with this idea of descendant and how long this is for. But anyway, let me carry on. It's very interesting. It's just the problem is, like all these things, it's so complicated and so nuanced that, and of course, God isn't here to sort of say, well, actually, I meant this, and why are you men thinking it this way when I meant it this way? But anyway, so where are we? Cain is excluded because he killed Abel. Seth is the third son of Adam and Eve, one of the three sons of Noah. Sem is the second born. Genesis 11:10 gives us more detail to understand Genesis 5:32 and 7:6, through whom the story continues towards Abraham, who is himself not the firstborn. He is indeed listed as the first of three sons in Genesis 11:26, but Acts 7:4 and a little maths helps clear that out. Isaac is the son of the promise obtained by faith, because it was humanly impossible for Sarah to conceive a child. Is therefore a miracle. Can God do miracles, by the way? The genealogy of Matthew 1:2-17 starts in Isaac and ends up in Jesus with a miracle. Not sure what was meant by that, but yeah. But Ishmael was the son according to the flesh, Galatians 4:29, obtained in doubt over the very same promise. Genesis 16 tells the story of Sarah telling Abraham, "The Lord has kept me from having children," verse 2. In plain English, it means, sorry, dear, God doesn't know what he's talking about, so let's just do it our way. I'm not sure that's the reading I would get from that. There was a custom at the time in the Middle East, is the code of Hammurabi, number 146, compare Genesis 16:3-4, where a barren woman can adopt a child conceived by a husband and a maidservant he had married, and that the child will be deemed their heir. So Abraham, having waited 10 years since Genesis 12, is understandably unsure about what's going to happen if he dies with a child. He marries Hagar, and she gives birth to Ishmael, Genesis 16:15. 13 years later, God spoke again to Abraham, gives him the promise we are considering today. Well, are we suggesting now that the child of Sarah was a adopted child? I'm not sure that's ever, I don't know, is that specified in the Bible, or this is another man interpretation? I don't know, but anyway, I don't know if I'm reading that. The covenant with the sign of circumcision. He obeys, and his whole household is circumcised with him. Genesis 17:24-27. That is why this day Jews and Muslim men are circumcised, both in Genesis 15:14 and 17:16. God is very precise and said that the promise is going through a child born both of his body and Sarah's womb, not Hagar's. As for Ishmael, I have heard you, Genesis 17:20. In other words, Abraham was asking the very same question. Why not Ishmael? And again, we are left with God's choice through history to favour not the first one, but another child, sometimes the second, sometimes the third, the fourth, the seventh. Yes, that's the bit I'm sort of like, I don't see it as, where is he definitively saying, only you? Because just like I say, as he repeated the promise to another person, doesn't mean that the first promise doesn't hold steady. So that'd be the only, maybe there is more quantification in the words. And of course, the other thing, like I think I'm going to come on to a bit later. I might leave it to when I come to that bit, but yeah. But when in chapter 21, Sarah is displeased with Ishmael, now 14 years old, mocking, i.e. deriding, maybe bullying, Isaac, still a baby, she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son." This was illegal under the circumstances. Hence, again, compare Hammurabi 16 or 168, 170, 171, Genesis 21:10. The woman, let alone the child born under this marriage agreement, could not be put away. And again, when God tells him to listen to Sarah's voice, Genesis 21:12, it is direct and mirrored reference to Adam listening to his wife, Genesis 3:17. Whatever it means is not accidental. We have here a text that is crafted and subtly put together, not a mere collection of legends. It is absolutely vital that we take time to read, to meditate, and understand what the text is saying, because it is not whimsical. Okay, what is the gap between Abraham and Moses? I think I actually went through this in the end to see that, but let's read it out. 430 years and reckoned between the promise made to Abraham when he was 99 years old, Genesis 17:1, and the time of Exodus 12:40, plus or minus 25 years if we go back even to Genesis 12. This is a relatively short time in the scope of things. Using the Bible itself and looking up the dates it gives us, we find that Genesis alone covers 2,369 years from creation to the death of Joseph. Abraham lived to be 175 years old, Genesis 25:7. His son Isaac lived 180, Genesis 35:28, and his grandson Jacob 147, Genesis 47:28. Ishmael lived 137 years, Genesis 25:27. So we see that Jacob is 15 years older when his grandfather Abraham dies. Abraham lived to 175 years. Oh, sorry about that. After that, we have Levi, Kohath, and Amram, Moses' father, who lives 137, 133, 137 years respectively. Remember, so 4 different times. Exodus 6 to 16:20. Moses himself lived 120 years. Deuteronomy 31 to 1, chapter 31, verse 1 to 34:7. And his brother Aaron 123 years, Numbers 33:39. A slow but steady decline, but they live an average of 140 years or less. I'm not sure. The only problem I have with that, obviously, is because now we don't live that age. Of course, it is a different time, isn't that? It's not possible. But, and of course, was it Methuselah lives for 999 years or whatever it is. I don't know how accurate that dating is, because I know there'll be some, people who read the Bible who read it as, it's exactly that. I don't know how we square that off anyway, but the promise was given to Abraham in Genesis 12 and is repeated several times. You can read that by yourself, but it was given to Isaac and to Jacob as well, so they transmitted it to their children and their family. They all knew about it. So in all, each generation from Abraham and Moses only took 72 years on average. The time between the death of Jacob, who was personally blessed by God, having inherited the blessing of Abraham and Isaac, to the time of Exodus, before we cannot say that any of the story may have been written down by Moses 222 years, potentially another 40 years, if it took time to write it down. So we're looking at a gap between 25th, not 430 years. How did Moses get the information to write the Torah? And again, 430 years again reigned in England Queen Elizabeth I, and nobody would ever say that she is a mythical queen. The idea that the ancient people were stupid or didn't record anything that happened during their lifetime is completely unfounded. Egyptian records go back to 6,000 years in the case of pyramids, texts, and Moses was given an education in Egypt, Acts 7:22. So he was definitely literate. He could read and write and had access to historical records. When he writes his own people's story up to this day, he has no need for special revelation. And while some think of the revelation of verbatim dictation, as in the case of the Quran, there are other scholars who prefer to speak of inspiration, i.e. God let people write with their own words, their own stylistic preference, and we end up with varied texts, laws, history, poetry, etc. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, we could even summarize that stories about creation, the flood, were common at the time. Well, we know that from history and Egyptian history, that the idea of creation, the flood, even the story similar to that of Jesus, goes back, is repeated throughout different generations and times pre the Torah. So were common at the time, given that they appear in every mythology over the world that have nothing to do with the monolithic faith. We're dealing with humanity's oldest memories here, and the fact that they concur for the large part is compelling evidence that something must have happened to give rise to it. Yes, well, I agree with that. It's possible that different people from different places wrote these things based on events that happen, like you would, if you saw a car crash and you get 5 different witnesses, and then they all go and write their story down, and then they go different places. So I get that. I didn't know that. I thought, because when I looked it up, it suggested that it was like the Quran, like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it was that Moses salam was given, God spoke to him. But here, some believe that he was inspired to write it. Of course, the problem is with that, if you say God wrote it, then it leaves less idea of faults, because we revere God in not making mistakes, whereas we know men can, although prophets are not meant to make mistakes. Although I know there's a different interpretation of that from biblical and Quranic. The only problem is, like with the Moses idea, is, of course, this is another one of those things that we have to remember, from the beginning when we're talking about, first principles, in the essence that we are putting our faith in the fact that there was a person called Moses, and maybe he is recorded in Roman times, I don't know. But we're putting the faith in, because I haven't personally done that research, and I expect most people who believe in Moses haven't done that research. They're taking it on, I haven't even thought about that, even that question. So the truth is, we are relying on the fact that there was this person called Moses, and that also he did actually write all this stuff, and also that what he wrote was, I don't know that if I was 100 years ago, this is blasphemy, but in the essence of truth, that's why I'm saying it, is we are putting our faith that what he wrote was truthful. If you believe in, like we say, and this goes with all prophets, even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he given through God over generation this to write down. We're assuming, because we're not there, and I don't know how we would validate. Like, it's easy to go to Charles Dickens and William Shakespeare and say, yeah, well, we know that's not true because it was fictional. They've made that clear, it's fictional. But with the Bible and the Quran, with Moses writing this, and I'm not trying to single out him, but I'm just talking about this because we're talking about this, and like I've said, I would equate this to all of them, is that he's written this down, and we must remember that we are putting our faith, because we don't know. I know the problem is the confirmation bias, and also because people want to believe, and that's, I get that, but we don't know, and we're assuming that he wrote this down because God told him to write it down, or because he was inspired, or he was given the words. But we have no way of vouching for that. We've no way of actually, I know religious people will say that, these things make sense, or these things come to pass, or all that kind of stuff. So that's the only thing I would say about that. That we have to keep that in mind. That's a big problem. That's what faith is about. I do believe in a creator. Random existence seems too far-fetched. But whether, like, these words have been written down, the thing is, we know how human beings are. And like you say, the human beings of the past are no different from the human beings of the future. It doesn't just mean because we are in a linear state that, because we see things linear, because they're past before us, that they weren't intelligent. We know they were, because we've seen the Stonehenge, we've seen the pyramids, we've seen how much, maths and science came from these generations before us, and all that kind of stuff, even democracy and etc. So that's not, I get that. But we know that human beings love, and especially those of the past, and even now, unfortunately, love power, control. And we know that, unfortunately, human beings, and I don't believe it is intrinsic, I believe we do learn it. We all have the ability to lie. We all have the ability to do things that are in our best interests. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, but what the fact is, what we're saying is, we know that a human being, in the past or now, in the future, can lie. Well, we can't say for the future because we don't know, but yeah, we're assuming. Can lie, can make things up, write works of great works. You look at, Shakespeare or Chaucer or, people even further than that who wrote things of great scholastic ability. So, that's what I'm saying, is that we have to remember that. Now, I know a lot of people will just put that to a side and not even going to think about that because it gets in the way, but I just thought I had to mention that because that is a truthful first principle. Why is it 40 years? 40 is often, like 7 in the Quran, is a recurring number in scripture. It is generally understood symbolically as a period of testing or a chance to start again. Here are a few examples. The flood lasted 40 years, 40 nights. Moses was 40 years old when he killed an Egyptian man. Spent 40 years in Median before the Isis. So there's a lot of examples about 40. I'm not going to read all those. You can read those. It's been on the screen long enough, isn't it? But yeah, we know that 40 days, 40 nights as well. Why is Ishmael not given the promised land? I believe the question behind the question is, why not Ishmael? Why not Arabs? Why not the Muslims? First and foremost, you have to understand the fact that there is no link between Ishmael and the Arabs. His mother was an Egyptian. Who are we talking about? His mother was an Egyptian slave, and Abraham was a Hebrew from Mesopotamia. You can possibly call him a Chaldean, but certainly not an Arab who lived hundreds of kilometers south of Canaan, Israel. There's no proven link between Ishmael and Muhammad. Now, the only thing I have a problem with this part is the authority it comes within, because I don't know. Abraham was a Hebrew. He was given that title. No, I mean, it wasn't. I don't know, like him per se, the area he was born within, what the makeup was back then. And like I say, I don't know the records that we get from them, how accurate they are or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that is neither here nor there, I don't think. But the direct link between Muhammad and Ishmael, I know Muslims, they want that link because to tie up with they want to tie up with Abraham. They want to tie up with the religions. That's the understanding, isn't it? If you read the Quran, it's talking about a lot of things that are in the Bible. These are, same stories. I mean, that sort of comes across as very much like, if it was made up, why so many sequels, as it were? Why does it have the same stories? I mean, maybe they're all taught the same stories and they just write those down. I don't know. But anyway, the idea between that, the only thing I get with the problem with that is that obviously if you reverse that argument to Christians and say, well, wait a minute, show me the link between Jesus down to Ishmael, and they will obviously bring out the bit that's written in the Bible with all the names. But I don't know how accurate that is, and how is there enough names in there to be able to span the 1,000 years for the descendants. And like I read, it is, a lot of scholars don't see that as as a historic record, just as I think I've got a thing that I'm going to read in a minute. So that's the only thing, like for a Christian to say, well, look, what's the link? I mean, but then there's lots of these names where, I mean, obviously Jews, modern day Jews, or even a lot of Jews don't believe in Jesus Christ as being that Messiah. Not that equates anything, but what I'm saying is that the argument that there's no link. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe there isn't a link. I don't know if there's a link between Jesus and Abraham or Ishmael. I know it's written in the Bible, but then again, I don't know that the Bible is factually accurate. I don't know the person who wrote it didn't just want to add that up so that works in that way. I don't know if there's enough names in that for the generation that spans between that. But yeah, I think I've got, which one did I have? Oh yeah, about Hebrew. How did Abraham become Hebrew? Was he born in Israel? I don't know, this is just a person, but this is from a university. The name Hebrew came from one of Abraham's ancestors named Eber. Abraham was born in Ur of Chaldeans. Archaeologists have recently discovered that city. Apparently, it was quite sophisticated for its time. The scriptures therefore indicate that the term Hebrew evidently became more of a distinction between those who spoke Hebrew and those who spoke another language. Okay, so it's to do with language. Recall that the language were changed at the Tower of Babel. The scripture said that the earth was divided and the people who spoke a different language separated, and each group went in different directions. Some went to South and North East Africa, some went to Europe, Northwest, some became Israel, Arabia, Mesopotamia, and the Far East. Scholars who study language and geography have been able to determine what related language group went where. It's a fascinating thing to notice patterns in language. So yeah, that was the one. There was another one I had somewhere, wasn't it? Oh yeah, that's to do with later. Yeah, so I don't know whether, I mean, maybe I would probably agree. I don't know. I've never seen anyone with a historical, with an actual genealogy be able to, I mean, anyone can write like I used as one of the pictures, anyone can write a geology tree, but whether that geology tree can be tested in the way science would test things, in the sense of like, can I actually go back and find a document that would actually verify this? I don't think either of them, whether it's Jesus or Ishmael or Muhammad to Isaac, could actually be proven. So the argument is mute in the sense that, well, if you're going to not believe one, then I don't know. But anyway, only the Islamic tradition says that Muhammad is the descendant of Ishmael in a bid to cement his prophethood. This is controversial, but the sources are scant to say the least, and you have to believe tradition and not historical records which do not exist. In what I read, at most, we know about the ancestor Muhammad up to the man named Adnan. Yeah, I've seen that. But the rest is unproven, and the scholars disagree. According to scholars of Sirah and history, such as Bajeh, Tabi, and Ibn Hazim, the above lineage record from Muhammad is historically reliable. This historically is any further lineage is questionable at best. Yes, but I would say that that's probably the same when it comes to Jesus and Ishmael. No, I mean, I'm not trying to like pick on it. This is where confirmation bias comes in, but the thing is, like, you can pick a scholar and say he says this. Like, you can pick a scientist who would say, I mean, and if you ever watch anything on the news, that they can, if you, whatever the angle of the story you want to get, if you want something that's pro, you want something that's against, you can find both sides and you can have them battle against each other. Or if you just want to show one side, you'll pick that one side who agrees with the thing that you want to say. And so therefore, just picking out scholars, well, anyone can do that and pick out a scholar that agrees with what you want or disagrees. And therefore, I mean, the fact that there's some disagreement is questionable. How can something be disagreeable if they're meant to both be telling the truth? Anyway, but was the prophet Abraham Jewish? Of course he wasn't. Neither was he Christian or Muslim, despite the claim of the contrary. And he wasn't from Africa or black or anything. We have to be consistent with retrofitting the narrative, as you say, as we could decide 25 we can live or die nearly 4,000 years ago. Yeah, I don't know. The only reason why I said that is because I had read before that there was a prophet that was black, which I think actually was Moses. But yeah, I know that the thing is, I mean, it always does interest me how especially white people will get very irate about this. And I know where it stems from. It stems from the fact that for a long, long time of modern time, all prophets, where have they been depicted in paintings, in drawings, in TV, in film, have always been portrayed as white. Whereas majority, I assume, are Jewish. Like, say, for example, Jesus, to make it easy, he would have been a person that wouldn't necessarily have been white. He may have been, more not white like British. So why is it the case that in all, like, Charlton Heston being cast, and I mean, no, that's because of the way films were made back then, but the fact is, like, why da Vinci painted God with a big white beard as a white man, or as Adam looking very white. Whereas, of course, in the Bible, I've read, I don't know this, I'm reading this as if I'm some kind of scholar. Adam is related to the word is Edom, which means red skin. So he wasn't in whitish in color based on that, and I know that's used elsewhere. So that the fact is that for a long, long time, prophets have been made out as if they had been white, you know, and why is that? Because those people that, you know, pushed those things were of that, and they wanted those prophets to look like them, I guess. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what evidence there is. Like, I did find this thing, which was from a blog. I don't know who's this person. There's so they've written a book. I mean, that doesn't mean anything really. I mean, there could be a scholar. They could be just a normal person. People often ask a question. I thought it was quite interesting the way this came about, though. Asked a question about Abraham's ancestors came out of Africa. The misconception is black populations are genetically unrelated to other populations. Molecular genetics has demonstrated that all humans living today have common ancestry, and that points to the origin of our first ancestors in Africa. From the beginning of human existence, there has been genetic diversity. Even today, Africa has the greatest genetic and linguistic diversity of any continent. Yeah, and I know that because I know like scientists will often either say Africa or Mesopotamia, isn't it? Maybe that's the religious aspect that's Mesopotamia, because that's where like Israel sort of is, isn't it? And maybe that's where is it the Garden of Eden? I don't know. But anyway, I know I'm skitting off different things I know nothing of. But yes, Africa is populated by black people. Human population in Africa has always had a great range of physical appearances, even today. So that, you know, in that sense, that just because he was born in an area of Africa doesn't necessarily mean he was black. So yeah, I get it from that point of view. Or he could have been. I don't know. Even today, Africa has the greatest genetic diversity of anywhere on Earth. For example, in antiquity, there were both red and black Nubians. They preserved their distinct colour by marrying within their own type, but the red and black Nubians were one people, a moiety. A moiety refers to each of two social ritual groups into which people is divided, especially among Australian Aborigines, some American Indians, and the ancient Nubians. There's a drawing. Even among the red and black Nubians, there was a range of skin tone. These red Nubian warriors are an example. Their wavy black hair and feathers resemble the Nebetan warriors of Edom. The Edomites were known to have reddish skin tone. Note that siblings, even twins, could have been born with different colour skins and hair types. The book of Genesis indicates that Abraham was a descendant of Adam, a red man. Abraham's territory was Edom, what the Greeks called Idome, meaning the land of red people. Since Abraham was a ruler, why are we going to Greek though? Because Genesis, what's Greeks got to do with it? Because Genesis was written in Hebrew, no? Anyway. Since Abraham was a ruler of Edom, it is likely that he had a red skin tone. I mean, based on what we just read before, that's not necessary, but this is how one of Abraham's greatest grandsons is described. Okay, Esau is listed in the Edomite ruling line in Genesis 36. There were Horn Hebrew chiefs, many of whom were descendants of the Seir, the Horite Hebrew. So yeah, it goes through. Does it actually end up giving us any answer? So suggesting he was, of a reddish skin color, possibly because of being related to Adam. But of course, I don't know how historically accurate that genealogy is, or where the evidence for that is. Where are we? I like the idea that the land was to be shared. The problem is that today the Jews are willing to share, live in peace in the land of Israel, but the Arab Muslims are not. This I had a big problem with as well, obviously because of history and stuff. But I don't know enough really to do with the conflict. I know bits of the conflict, and I know that obviously there's been terrorist organisations who align with Palestine or the Arab or Muslim aspect. But to make it out as so black and white, I mean, we know all wars are never like that. And we know that, Israel, based on the system that we live within, which everyone's meant to agree in, and they have a democracy under, which claim to be part of and signatories of, they've been breaking international law for a long, long time. And, we look at I know everyone knows that the October 7th, what happened there, but what's happened since Israel, as in the government's response, not Israelis, the government who are in power at this particular time. A lot of people are using the words ethnic cleansing and genocide and all sorts of stuff like that. And we see on a daily basis children and people that are definitely not members of Hamas ending up as in a collective punishment and the starvation, all that kind of stuff. And whether there might be some propaganda, which I'm sure there is from Hamas and that side, there is certainly something going on. And therefore, to sort of make out that only one side wants to live in peace, yeah, I get it. Maybe, I suspect, and I've seen, on that Louis Theroux program, which started me on this journey, is that there's a lot of set people that want Israel only for Israel, and there's a lot of the Palestinians that want only for Palestine because of this argument of this promised land question. And therefore, I suspect you can find both sides, and it's not as clean as like only one side is good. There may be one side that's better than another. I don't know. I'm not trying to defend anything or whatever. I don't know enough about it, but this idea of that, like they've rejected every peace treaty since 1948. And by the way, there are Arab Jews living in Israel as well, and Arab Christians living in Gaza. Yes. Why do we forget them so often and polarize the debate on Jews and Muslims hating each other? No, the Quran itself seems to imply that Allah gave the Holy Land to the children of Israel. If it's so, why do the Arabs want it so bad of themselves? Well, from their point of view, I guess their argument is that the reason for Jesus coming was so that he could, as a Messiah, correct the things of the past that have gone away. And like with any prophet, that's the reason for coming back, isn't it? And they believe that Prophet Muhammad came back because it's gone again, and to rebring it back, to bring back God's word. And I suppose that they believe that that promise goes back through to them, through Ishmael. And I guess they want to be the chosen people as well. Maybe they believe they are, they are descendants, I guess, of those. Through remarriage and all that kind of stuff, and of the same family, possibly. I don't know whether, but yes. From my point of view, I don't know why. If they truly believed, whether you believe it went to Isaac and whether it's gone back through or whatever, if you were religious and you truly believed in religion and you believed in God giving something to someone as a reverence, whatever it is, you think that all three of these religions, Jews, Muslims, Christians, would have the dignity to live together, especially when you see the bigger picture of that we're all human beings, in accordance to all three of the Abrahamic religions, believing that God created all of us equally, are all his children, and knowing all the sins and all the bad things like war and killing each other and pride and greed and money and all that kind of stuff. If you really believed in all those things, you'd be living together with it. You wouldn't be destroying the shit out of it and causing and killing God's creation and abusing the creation of all the things that he's given you to make weapons and all that kind of stuff. So that would be, I would see it from that point. Why aren't they all living together when they all claim to be religious? Unfortunately, as ever, they're not really, well, a lot of them maybe are not really following that. And that was another thing I was thinking about, this idea of when this, and it comes into, I think, the next bit of like, God giving the land. I questioned this before because it made no sense to me. Why, if God gave the whole earth to humanity, why did he give a little bit of land? I know it's quite a big expanse to this one nation, but maybe it's just to set things up and divide apart. And the thing is that I was also thinking, when you say that, when you think about that, and most people think about that, They instantly think about possession. And I'm wondering, that may be the problem. Like thinking of this land is yours. I mean, there's no way you could keep other people out of it. I'm sure there were people that lived there. I mean, I know there were people there before, but there were people that lived there that were maybe not part of the faith. And why would that be a problem? It shouldn't be a problem because, you're all children of God. And therefore, but we see it as possession because of the way we think. And I wonder, it wasn't told to a man. It was told to a prophet, and a very important prophet, the father of religion. And I wonder whether his heart was, because he was so close to God, didn't think of it maybe in the possessive way, and we've interpreted it that way. And he thought of it as just a place where his descendants would grow and the faith would accumulate, and he didn't need to, say, defend it or fight for it. I don't know. Maybe that's my rose-tinted how I would like to see the heart of someone behave like that. But I don't know, because my understanding, I read bits of it, that there were people there living there before. So was there a war to claim that bit of land? And therefore that, to me, is a little bit problematic. But I don't know if that's historically accurate or not. But I would verge to see that my understanding is that prophets are different than men. They're chosen because, I know they are men, but they're chosen because of their closeness to God, and they have that. And if you have that kind of love and closeness to God, that you are able to communicate with him, assuming this is all true, of course, then I think that would make you different and make you see things differently than ordinary men, even ordinary pious men, because we all see things like that. If someone gives you something, you think it's yours, your bit of land, knowing that we're all going to die. How is it your bit of land when you know you're going to die? And we can't take anything with us. And everything was given to all of us. It's just someone came along and split it all up and said, this is mine, that's yours, and you need this piece of paper to get to it. I don't know whether that's in God's mind and in the prophets. So that's the thing I'm thinking of, is that this argument we're seeing and going through of whose it is and fighting over it and this, that, and the other, I don't believe God wants that. And I don't believe the prophets who were given that promise understood it in that way. I don't know. I would hope not. I would hope that they would see it as like, yeah, this is, God's given this to me. But that doesn't mean I can't share it with you. It doesn't mean you can't live here freely. It doesn't mean you can't have the same rights as me. That doesn't mean I can't teach you the beauty and love that I've been told about this God that's given me this land, that I can share that with you as also. No? How did, we're near the end, it's getting long, isn't it? How did Abraham promise land develop into the state of Israel? This is a very hot, complex, political, religious question, whether you believe records exist that mention the biblical land and at least 37 people of the Old Testament as historical long before Christianity and Islam. And if they existed and they tell us about the history, how would you say they don't know what they're talking about? Do they have claim to the land that lived on? What about the descendants? What to make of exiles as a consequence for their sins? The people of the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judea get deported to Assyria and Babylon. This was mentioned as far back as Deuteronomy. Jeremiah also talked about the exile to Babylon in chapter 25:11, saying that it will last 70 years. But in the very next verse, he also prophesies the return from captivity after the 7 years. Now, in these days, deported people often intermarried and disappeared from history as a distinct people's group. But the Jews didn't. They kept their identity and their religion, not adopting those of surrounding cultures. When they came back under Ezra and Nehemiah, I don't know whether, anyway, but they built Jerusalem and the temple and started all over again. It is true that they were generally called Judeans before the exile and come to known as Jews after the return from the Babylonian captivity, but it's the same people's group. DNA tests confirm it. How many far back have we had DNA tests from people? Oh, I suppose it's like DNA tests now to show that. But I find it difficult to believe that people didn't intermarry if there were people around, because love is a way of doing that. But I don't know. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. So in AD 70, when the Jerusalem temple was destroyed, and again in 135 AD, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, when most of the Jews were driven off the land, they knew that they would eventually come back. The Jewish prayers concluded with these words, next year in Jerusalem. In fact, There have always been Jews living in the land throughout the last 2,000 years. The land was not formally named Palestine until in the early 2nd century CE. The Roman province called Judea was renamed Syria Palestina, literally Palestine in Syria. Jerusalem was renamed Aelia Capitolina in an effort to erase the Jewish identity, a gesture that would be called today a hate crime, or ethnic cleansing, I guess. Was that a YouTube video asked the question, who controlled Jerusalem the longest? According to historian Eric Klein, Jerusalem has been besieged 23 times, attacked 50 times. The history of the city is complex and so on one side as it seems. Yes, I would agree. And the people themselves were not called Palestinians. This is a modern invention, mainly from the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, under the last period of the Ottoman Empire, and mainly during the British Mandate over the Near East. In fact, it is not until 1967 that the Arabs living in the Holy Land were called Palestinians. To make a political point, it is a historical fallacy to bring this question back into time and apply it to people who didn't actually identify as such. It's like calling you a Saxon today if you yourself identify as British, even though you may have some of their genes. Well, I don't know. I mean, well, we're all African based on genealogy. No, we all come from the same, don't we? But anyway, I don't know. I don't know how you would. Then I guess you could argue two things. What really are you? Are you what you think you are, or are you what you are? Like, if your genealogy can tell you that you're, Scottish, but you were born in England, which are you? I mean, that you could take that either way, isn't it? I don't see that as clear cut. That's just one of these man-made things, though, isn't it? Really, in the sense that we're all human beings. That's how I see it. But anyway, where are we? It is if you're the British, even though you have some of their genes. Yasser Arafat himself, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, had Egyptian roots, and we refer to him as Palestinian only because of the cause he embraced. Note, I do not agree 100% with the politics of the State of Israel. Quite the contrary. Sorry, I wasn't ready with that. But we know 2 or 3 things for sure, do we? Firstly, when the Jews made Aliyah, immigration to Israel, and settled there at the end of the 1800s, they bought the land. They didn't steal it. And the Arabs were willing to sell. How then do these and the media complain today of illegal occupation of white colonization? I don't get it. I suppose the thing is, and I pause upon this point as well, this idea, and my understanding is that the British, well, my understanding, and I don't know if this is historically accurate or not, but my understanding is that Europe in the Second World War, we know what happened in Germany with the Holocaust and with the hate towards Jews. That hate towards Jews was European bound. There was a lot of European nations that had that anti-Semitic, didn't like Jewish people. And my understanding is that Britain may have also had that sentiment. And so they didn't want to relocate Jewish people within the UK and wanted, maybe also there were some that wanted also for them to have the State of Israel. But my understanding is that they bought the land off the sheikh of that area. Now, I don't know whether any of that part is true, but the fact is that if Sir Keir Starmer was offered money by Donald Trump, say, to buy the United Kingdom for £1 million, and his politicians signed off on it, would everyone in the country be happy with that? Would everyone in the country who considers themselves a citizen, a British person or whatever, be happy with that and consider that that was a decision that should have been made on their behalf by their leaders? So that argument of like, well, because they bought it, it means it's okay. What are they complaining about? Well, that's the argument I would give. No, I think that's quite a valid argument. I don't know. The British have a way in the past, if we look through history of divide and conquer and all that kind of stuff, what happened in Pakistan and India, the divisions there, Ireland and Northern Ireland and divisions there, all that kind of stuff. How the British Empire treated countries in the past especially like Africa, the stealing of gold, the slave trade, all that kind of stuff, the influence they had, and the fact that they could go along to someone and sweet talk him into selling his whole country, in that sense. So I don't know, that argument to me is a little bit, that was what I would say to that. But secondly, whether we like it or not, there is no evidence ever of the state of Israel starting a war with its neighbors. I don't know about that. It's always, maybe that's true. I suppose, though, some of the people may feel, no, I don't, I think they should all live there as human beings, because that's intrinsically what everyone is first. And the other bit is not. And I think they should all live together. But I get it why some people who may live there, after the British decided to pay someone to give it to someone else, whether there are historical links or whatever, or people living there anyway, but just gave it to one set of people and said, well, this is yours now, and you deal with this problem. I can understand why maybe then the other side, who may be treated like in encamped areas and not given the same rights and not even being recognised as a state, may have an issue. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, because I think they should all live together, and especially if all these people live in the Holy Land and they're meant to be religious, or not meant to be religious, but they claim to be, doing this for God and religion, that they would want to live with their fellow brothers of God and sisters of children of God. It's always come from the opposite side, including the latest October 7th attacks launched by Hamas, which has, since 1987, enshrined the destruction of the State of Israel in its founding manifesto. Israel will be established and will stay established until Islam nullifies it as it nullified what was before it. That means no settlement, no peace treaty. Well, I get terrorist organizations, yes, they tend to have these stupid mandates, and that's why they shouldn't exist. And that's why I don't understand why the people of Palestine, I mean, I know why they would, because they feel that these are the only people that are going to stand up for them, but they're making a grave mistake, because they're, like you say, they're picking a side that wants the annihilation of a set of people that, I mean, technically, if you go back far enough to Ishmael and Isaac and Abraham, they probably all have similar DNA or genetics or connections, because they were all from that. If they were all from that same variant, they didn't come from elsewhere. I mean, if we all came from Africa anyway, we're all connected in that way. But yeah, I just don't get the killing of each other and this idea of, like, I get it, like Hamas do have that mandate, I've heard that, but I've also heard Israel politicians say similar things on that program. Lulu Farrow, that lady, said almost the same kind of thing, that she didn't want, because unfortunately that's how men, women, humanity still wants to, like, this is the thing I talk about on the Pursuit of Truth a lot, of this idea of keeping with this man-made system, this idea of possession and greed, rather than, like I say, if God exists, if he gave us life, he gave us everything. We're so lucky that we're on a place that has all the resources, whether it's people, it has all the ideas, all the great knowledge, all the strength to do these things, all the materials. We've been given all of this stuff, and we put a price tag on it and separate it off and fight against each other and make ways to do that, rather than the love and humanity, that love to do all that. Imagine a parent doing all that, giving you everything through time immemorial, everything, and then promising you forever life. That kind of love is man can't even touch upon that. And unfortunately, we fail by how the test on this place of how we treat each other. Anyway, what did Moses, okay, we're nearly end. What year did Moses write the Torah? What year did Prophet Abraham live? Okay, so I've sort of got some of that. Again, we need to pay attention to the maths here. There are a few ways to compute the dates. According to the Bible, if you give them credit, this is what modern scholars dispute, arguing that the ancients were stupid and that we've evolved to know better than they. But to honestly read and study a text, we need to take it and give it its benefit of doubt. Everybody laughed at Henrik Schliemann when he announced he could find the legendary city of Troy based solely upon his reading of the Iliad of Homer, but he did in fact discover it, and they had to accept it. Why then is it allowed to laugh at the Bible? The French philosopher Voltaire, who was famously against the Bible, wrote that the city of Nineveh could never have existed described in the books of Kings, Chronicles, Jonah, Isaiah, and others. For him, it was pure invention. And yet, in 1842, Paul-Émile Botta found the ruins of Dor Shakhrun, the palace of the king Sargon II. In 1847, so less than 70 years after Voltaire's death, Nineveh itself was discovered, along with so many items and writings, some of which authenticate the Bible. Now it is an indisputable fact. And the same goes with the Hittites, a people group only described in the Bible until they were rediscovered, along with their language and civilization, in the early 20th century. Back to the question, the earliest link between the biblical and profane history to be really considered reliable by historians to the period of the Babylonian Empire, the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, allows us to tie the historical books of Kings and Chronicles, and we can compute the regnal dates for those of Kings back to Solomon. The temple Solomon built in the 4th year of his reign is generally dated to 96 BC. Yeah, so that goes into that. But if Solomon was both were correct, what about the Torah as an antiquated text? Whether you believe Moses actually wrote it or not, is the information you read relevant? I dare say it is accurate. If you find it accurate historically, i.e., what you can test scientifically, you cannot then deny it claims to matters such as spiritual, what you cannot, as it is after a book about faith in God, not just about who did what in such a place of time. It is a promise was given to Isaac and then the children of Israel, eventually ending up spiritually in the person of Jesus Christ. It is to claim the Bible makes us whole, not something we can read into or out of as we please. Conclusion. Sorry, I missed that little bit out there. I've left it there if anyone wants to pause and read it. Conclusion. It's just I'm getting over an hour now. I really enjoyed listening to your questions and musings, and I found it very honest and thought-provoking. I wanted to research a few, and I've written here. I didn't expect it to be this long before I replied to your comment on YouTube and decided to send these via emails. It's more convenient to read them on a phone. Yes, it has been, because it would have been very long on YouTube. I hope you don't mind that I replied back in the way I like it and these videos, because I think what you said was great, and it opened my mind to seeing things. And yeah, maybe I've said some things that are questioning what you said, and I'm saying that in just my views of how I would see things, or how I've seen other people would argue those points to try and get to a round image or answer to it. But yeah, I mean, you've obviously got a lot more scholarly understanding of these texts and etc. It'd be interesting to know, I don't know if you do know Hebrew, or and whether the phrases, the translation of the seed and seeds and all that kind of sentence, how accurate that is, understanding. So I understand that my worldview or my opinion may not match with yours, and that's okay. Yeah, that is definitely not the end of the matter, and I continue to trade informed research just like you do. I do not wish to convert you to any particular view, and you may take what you like, disregard the rest, and agree to disagree. I hope you continue the conversation. Show with many regards, Pierre, and blessings. And God bless you, Pierre. I mean, that is, I must say, I've never got such a beautiful, loving response, from my silly little videos on Pursuit of Truth, to someone to go to all this trouble to write all this, especially like a religious subject where that you can easily inflame someone or make them angry, and then you get in this problem of a spat, and you see that all the time. It's so nice to get such a beautiful letter with so many ideas and all the bits that I missed out, and the facts and stuff. And it shows you that, it just shows you how there's so many different, it's unfortunate really, especially within religion, that there's so many ways you can look at something. I mean, maybe this is a great thing with I don't know, but it just makes it, for me, maybe this is my mind or my autistic mind, that it'd be nice if it was clear cut, that there was no ambiguity, there was no sort of reading between the lines or interpretation, that you could just get this. But unfortunately, like, as you see, like with all religions and all things, there's always, like as Phil Collins said, both sides of the story. And it's just unfortunate that that's the way, because that always allows for one side and another side. And then how do you find the truth? But I suppose at the end of the day, like I hear a lot of, truthers talk about, is that, and at the end of the day, is your journey to find the truth. And only you can be judged upon that, when we believe in God judging us in the sense that he knows our intention, he knows our hearts, he knows what we intend, and that we have to find our way through this difficult time and try and find the truth. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this letter, and it's just showed me that I'll leave on that page where I didn't read all of it, so anyone can read the rest. It's just I just didn't want to run out of time and get it not finished. It just I mean, the amount of time it must have taken for all that information and quotes and like a dissertation, like someone had written me a dissertation that they didn't have to do and gave me all this information to help me see the I mean, I think I saw because I made how many videos about the Promised Land in the end, there was at 4. Each one I would learn something else, and I would say, oh, okay, I don't know if Pierre listened to all of these bits, because I sort of, 1 minute I'm thinking, okay, yeah, this means you can look at it and that they both could share this. And then the next one I found something else and went, oh no, you can't. It only went to Ishmael. And then there was another bit where I found that they intermarried back into the family, and could that sort of square away that those people, the descendants of those people still have that promise because it was given to the descendants, and they are then, that person has a child, and then maybe they are a modern day Palestinian, as it were, and then a modern day Jew. But it's just to me, and I know this is why some people have a trouble with religion, in the sense that they see it as, but I mean, you could say this with politics, you could say this with anything, is that and that's why it's not a great argument, is that, the conflict it causes. But the real conflict isn't religion. It isn't God. God gave us everything. God gave us love. But the real problem of all these situations, the common denominator, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's not, it is us. It is humanity. Is what we're doing. And that sometimes we will hold on to our own understanding, despite of the truth. Or, someone can, with most people, you could put, I mean, not God, but you could put a piece of paper in front of someone with the truth on it, and you knew it was 100% the truth. And there'll be a lot of people, if it goes against their belief, remembering that word, because of confirmation bias and all this kind of stuff, it wouldn't sink in. They would just go against it. They had a whole argument about it. Or they would just say, no, I'm going to believe the way I'm going to believe. I don't believe what you said. I don't know whether, I was going to say, like, if God came down and said, this is the truth, I don't know whether people would still turn around and say to him, no, you're wrong. And no, I suppose you couldn't, because it's God. Well, they'd probably say, no, you're not God, isn't it? Like how other prophets haven't been believed, because a lot of Jews don't believe that the Messiah's come yet, and they're still waiting for him. Same as with Muhammad, etc. And I'm sure there's lots of other prophets where people didn't believe them at the time. But it's such a shame the way. The truth is, no matter what the argument is, whether this bit of land that has been given to a descendant of a people, Prophet Abraham's people, and like I say, I wonder whether the promise given, or the covenant, or whatever you want to call it, I know there's particular terms, given to Abraham from God, reported by Moses 200 or 400 years later, was maybe not in the same way that we men see it. And I use that in the sense of like humanity, and men and women see it in the sense of possession, in that mindset. And whether it was said to a prophet who was so close and loving of God and religion, and maybe it wasn't a possession in that way, and that all these people who are fighting over it are fighting over, because they're like that animalistic side of us, not over the side of God, of love, of these prophets that bring joy and love. And I think that's the essence, I think, is being missed of this. That who it doesn't matter It shouldn't matter. We're all human beings. We're all, whether you believe or not, whether there's a creator or not, or you believe that he's there or not, the creator. Because I don't know, I shouldn't use now pronouns, but we're all his children according to the text. We're all children of God. And if you believe in Jesus, you believe in the idea of that, being forgiven and all that kind of stuff. It's just a shame in a place where, even if we did invent religion and faith and etc. and God and all this kind of stuff, that we haven't been able to live with each other in a peaceful way. And this is like what happening in the Promised Land is just a microcosm of all of the things that happen within humanity, the fighting of bits of things that were given to us freely, that we could have chosen to continue to have it freely and just, lived harmoniously with each other in this thing that was given to all of us and worked a way for us all to benefit in that kind of love. That, I guess, is like a heaven. But weren't we promised a heaven on earth? And if we were, whose duty is that? Because God has given us free will. Or if there isn't a God, we have free will. Why are we choosing this way to live? I know I go on and bang on about that on all my pursuits of truth. They all seem to come back to that. But yeah, anyway, this is a beautiful letter. And take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.